Hey guys, it's Selwen here, back again with the Frost Decay since my first ever guide with an obligatory blue team mug. Why not? And also, I wanted to start with something different. If you do main a Frost Decay, or at least play it, do leave a comment on why, because I love hearing you guys' responses on why you play a certain class. Anyway, what's it all about? Well, to first understand the Frost Decay, and Decay in general, you need to understand its resources, which are runes and runic power. You possess 6 runes at all times, and as they are used with certain abilities, they will get depleted and slowly generate back up 3 at any given point. That generation is gonna depend mainly on your haste, among other buffs. Runic power is then generated by the consumption of those said runes, each rune giving you 10 for a max of 100. So an ability like Obliterate, which is your most spammable ability, costs 2 runes and does pretty high damage and in turn generates 20 runic power. Frost Strike, another of your main abilities, will in turn cost 25 runic power to use and like Obliterate, dealing pretty high damage. Among those, there's also Howling Blast, a ranged spell cleaving all around the target, dealing pretty low damage, costing 1 rune, and applies your dot, Frost Fever. Frost Fever deals pretty low damage also, but each tick is gonna give you 5 runic power. Remorseless Winter costs 1 rune, deals damage all around you while it's active, and slows. And your main coolies include Pillars of Frost, increasing your strength by 20% and makes you immune to knockback on 1 minute cooldown. Empower Rune Weapon refreshes all of your runes on demand and giving you 25 runic power on a 3-minute cooldown. And Cindergrosa's Fury, also known as the Big Cheese, a huge line type of AoE hitting like a truck on a 5-minute cooldown. Then you also have some passives that will enhance those present abilities, like Killing Machine, making your auto attack crits have a chance to give you a proc to make your next Obliterate crit. Rhyme makes your Obliterates have a 45% chance to proc to increase your next Howling Blast damage by 300% and it's free of runes, actually making it worthwhile to use. And Runic Empowerment, when you spend runic power, it has a chance of 1% per runic power to give you a rune back. Your artifact ability and last passive, yes, I know, a passive, quite sad, makes your attacks have a chance to summon some icy swords to stop your enemies, but your Obliterate also makes them proc 100% of the time. There's also your Rune Forging enhancing your weapons, but just apply a Fallen Crusader and a Razorize to each of your weapons and you're gonna be fine. Now as for talents, they were kinda butchered a few patches back in order to break the breath meme, which, if you don't know what that is, was a build surrounding this talent right here called Breath of Cindergrosa. And in the process, we lost a lot of synergy in our talents, and we were left with mainly the Obliteration build, with some changes for multi-target, or if you have the tier 21, Breath build still works-ish, but it's not all that viable and I don't really recommend for you to play it. I might still talk about it if I have the time, but we'll see. So for your first tier, you would want Runic Attenuation, providing 1 runic power with every auto attack, nothing special. Will just allow you to get a couple more Frost Strikes over the course of the fight. Ice Talents can also work as it gives you higher attack speed after a Frost Strike, giving a buff that you want to keep up, which will in turn give you more Killing Machine procs. In realistic situations, however, keeping the buff up can prove challenging, not just on how the class works, but the fight itself, so making Runic Attenuation a safer choice. Shattering Strikes will work nicely for that extra Frost Strike damage from consuming those Razorize debuffs, but is only worthwhile if you have the tier 21 Force Set bonus, but more on that later. Tier 2, Murderous Efficiency, will be best providing a 50% chance when consuming Killing Machine procs to gain a rune, essentially cutting the cost of that Obliterate by half, giving you more sustainability in your runes and improving the overall flow of your rotation. Third tier, Ice Cap will be best by decreasing the cooldown of Pillars of Frost from Frost Strikes and Obliterate crits by 1 second, decreasing it to about 20 seconds give or take overall. Particularly great talent when you combine with your Lego wrists. Without said wrists, Avalanche does come close, but I still advise on Ice Cap so its timers align perfectly with your obliteration talent. Next tier is just utility based, so choose what you prefer. I generally recommend Winter is Coming for a pretty good stun. The following tier after that is again situational, so choose what you prefer, but it can help your DPS in certain situations though, such as volatile shielding, but it's very minor, but even being so, I would still recommend it most of the time. And next tier, Gathering Storm is the best talent here, even for single targets, as it will add a new layer to your Remorseless Winter by increasing its damage and duration from your rune consumption. And lastly, Obliteration, a new DPS cooldown, reducing the cost of Obliterate by 1 rune and making your Frost Strike and Howling Blast Grand Killing Machine. Nothing too fancy, but it works. As for your breath build, nothing will change really, you just want to take it. On the 3rd tier, Horn of Winter will possibly be the best choice here for more resources, but as I said previously, to make it work properly you would need Hungering Rune Weapon, which right now is also a last tier talent, so again there's absolutely no synergy in your talents in order to use the said breath build. As for multi-target or Mythic Plus build, nothing changes really, you can perfectly use with this build for such situations. Freeze and Fog is a choice worth to consider for the Howling Blast extra damage, but Murderous Efficiency will still work best for more runes. Glacial Advance is not worth taking over Ice Cap, and Frost Sight is amazing, but only take it for sustained type of AoE, so fantastic in bosses like the Anturan High Command or of course Mythic Plus. Well, some of them at least, where trash packs are decent and not something like Upper Karazhan. Now with that then, let's go over your rotation starting in single target, then your opener and cooldowns, and finish off with multi-target. So let's talk about on how your normal rotation is gonna play out most of the time and how you want to use your abilities. So your first priority will be on having Frost Fever up. It's really quite brainless, you never have to think about it, but when starting up you can indeed use a regular Howling Blast just to apply it. You never want to use it without a proc from this point on. Now that said, you can skip this step, be on a boss fight or whatever you are on, and just wait for those Rhyme procs to use a Howling Blast to apply said Frost Fever. This way you will save a rune for an Obliterate. Problem is, if you don't get a proc right away, which can happen, you might have a couple of seconds without a Frost Fever up, and then you're losing out on precious runic power. So I would recommend for you to always open with a Howling Blast. But if you're feeling confident, you can skip it. Either way, it won't be a drastic DPS increase or decrease. Then you need to start consuming or dumping runes, and obviously start to put out damage, so obliterates. And as for them, you just can use them whenever you have runes up. However, they're gonna give you 20 runic power at all times, but can also proc one of your traits, generating an extra 13 or so runic power depending on your rank. Plus you have your Frost Fever ticks going on in the background, meaning you're just gonna keep on using obliterates between the windows of 0 to around 70 runic power. So when close to the cap, stop using it so you don't go over the set cap and let that runic power go to waste. Another thing to keep in mind is your procs. Killing Machine, you just want to use it as fast as you get it to avoid overrides as much as humanly possible. Remember that they can also give you a rune, so it's extra valuable. So consume it as long as you're not going to overcap runic power or you have a Rhyme proc up. So your Rhyme allows for those free and powerful Howling Blast, and you want to get rid of it as fast as possible before using another Obliterate. So like Killing Machine, you don't want to override it. So if you have one up and you use another Obliterate, that could have been a second proc, but since you already had the buff, it gets lost into the nether. So get rid of that proc always before going into another Obliterate. Besides that, just spam between those windows and procs. As for Frost Strike, will be on a similar use to your Obliterate. Difference is it costs runic power, which Obliterate is so kind to give you loads. So when do you use it? Well, whenever near that set cap of runic power. So when there, you're just going to use Frost Strike instead. And this is when your decision on when to use Frost Strike or Obliterates will come in. The previous procs will always take priority, like Rhymes, or if you get the Killing Machine in the middle of your Frost Strikes, taking in mind the rules that I just said. However, Frost Strike costs runic power, meaning it can proc runic empowerment, giving you a rune back. They will essentially feed off each other. So when you get near the cap of runic power and you use a Frost Strike, you need to be on a constant alert for those set procs, because you don't want to be in a situation that when you're using Frost Strikes, you have 5 or more runes. The reason being, they might give you some back due to runic empowerment, and if you add max, they will go to waste. So keep a constant track of your resources and switch in between Frost Strike and Obliterate if that happens. And then of course be mindful of the procs, Killing Machines, and then the Rhymes. So sometimes you might get near the cap and just do a couple of Frost Strikes and then go back to Obliterates. Other times you might use one Frost Strike, then back to Obliterate, do Killing Machine, and then you might get a Rhyme proc, so you do use All in Past, then you go to a Frost Strike and then go back to Obliterates. All is going to depend on your resources and procs, so manage that well to maximize them following those set rules. Remember, your runes only generate 3 at a time, so that's kinda the sweet spot that you want to be on, but that's an advanced thing and I don't want to get there on this video. Overall, if you do that correctly, you will also minimize your downtimes, which will happen anyway when you get no procs that you give you runes, be from runic empowerment or even murderous efficiency. You will get these rare moments where you have nothing to click and there's nothing you can really do besides your cooldown that I will talk next, but if unavailable, just wait until you get your runes back. Now, besides that, you also get Remorseless Winter to use in single target due to the Gathering Storm talent. And the way you want to use it is just before you actually start doing Obliterates. So in the start of a fight, for an example, you pop it first, then go into your Obliterates. Each one is going to give you 2 stacks of the damage buff, and your goal here is to reach the 10 stacks before it runs out. So like I said, the easy way to put it is to use on cooldown right when you are about to use Obliterates, so low on runic power and high on runes, and it will essentially do its thing. That said, you can also put an extra focus on it, not too much that will screw up your rotation like your management of procs, like Rhyme, which will also give you a sack to it by the way, or the uses of Frost Strike and runic power, but by adding just an extra focus to it as you get more comfortable with your Frost Decay, will allow you to get much better uptimes with it, and with a good amount of haste and procs, and especially Bloodlust, you will be able to make it last for 20 seconds, allowing you to click the ability again on cooldown before it actually goes down, so it stays at 10 stacks for a pretty long time, especially great in cleaving fights with 2 bosses or so. If you can't be arsed, just use it on cooldown before using Obliterates, okay? Now, all of this will change slightly if you have the tier 21 4th set bonus, and you decide to use Shattering Strikes, which consumes your Razor Eyes stacks. Razor Eyes is just applied from your melee attacks and it stacks 5 times for 10% extra frost damage. However, with the talent, Frost Strike will consume it to deal more damage. With regular gear, it isn't worth to lose that percentage and then have to building it back up and then losing it again. But once you get the 4th set, you will get this Icy Barrage thingy, which will also apply Razor Eyes, meaning its stacks are gonna be built much faster, becoming a DPS increase to consume them with a set Frost Strike. Now, your rotation won't change much. You should be doing the same things, but you should track the Razor Eyes stacks in order to use a Frost Strike at 5 as soon as possible, so taking a higher priority than before in order to maximize their uses with the set stacks. So if you add 50 runic power, for an example, and you can use Obliterates, but you add 5 stacks of Razor Eyes, you're gonna prioritize that Frost Strike instead, because again, the faster you consume those stacks, the more of them you're gonna get in the long run. That said, don't sacrifice your entire rotation because of it. Just add an extra focus like with a Gathering Storm and the Remorseless Winter. Now, with the understanding of all of that, let's talk cooldowns and opener. So when opening up, you can start with that Howling Blast for the Frost Fever or not if you feel confident on the proc, you know, the whole talk from before. Then as you are about to reach a boss in all of your glorious walking from the lack of mobility, you pop Remorseless Winter, followed by Pillars of Frost. About Pillars of Frost, nothing changes, alright? It just increases all of your damage, more especially if you have the Lego wrists, and you just want to use it on cooldown. Comes off cooldown, use it right away. Remember that with Ice Cap, the Obliterate and Frost Strike crits reduce its cooldown, so you want that cooldown to be always sticking. Then you're gonna go for those big Obliterates. They're gonna hit extra hard now and gonna stack up that Remorseless Winter. Then when with 25 plus runic power, so after 1 or 2 Obliterates, pop your Obliteration, and nothing changes here really. Frost Strike and Howling Blast are gonna create Killing Machine, so just create them and consume them for its entire duration. In this window, you're gonna follow the same priorities with your Rhyme and only use Frost Strike if you don't have a Rhyme proc or near the cap of runic power, so 70 to 80 runic power. So keep a lookout for that, or add 5 stacks of Razor Eyes if playing with Shattering Strikes. Keep it up until Obliteration drops and then resume a normal rotation. Your Gathering Storm will also stay nicely here, as Obliteration will still benefit the 2 runes cost of Obliterate, just like those Rhyme procs. So using a Remorseless Winter before it should be something you want to aim for, if possible. As for Syndegros's Fury, is a simplicity, it does a lot of damage on demand and you want it to try and hit multiple enemies. So if you are in a boss fight that is just single target for its entire duration, use it right in your opener before or after Obliteration. If you are gonna get ads or something similar in the next seconds or in 1 to 2 minutes, save it to use it then. But more importantly, above all, use it with a Pillars of Frost always, even if you have to delay Syndegros's mid-fight for it, and 5 stacks of Razor Eyes for the extra frost damage, so delay it a few seconds into your opener. Your Crystalline Sword also reduces its cooldown, so you should be able to use it twice a fight, depending on the duration. Now, one cooldown missing, which is Empower Rune Weapon, and you want to use it as much as you can during boss fights, but only when you are completely empty of resources, so your downtimes. Meaning, if you are empty of runic power and empty of runes, and Obliterate is only ready in about 1+ second, pop it, then keep doing your rotation and DPS. Using our cooldowns mid-fight, well, like I said, Pillars of Frost use when available, and Obliteration follows the same idea, but always with Pillars of Frost, so stack them. Pillars of Frost always comes ready first due to Ice Cap, but remember to align it with Obliteration. As long as you use it with 10 less seconds to go on your Obliteration, it's fine, since its duration of 10 seconds fits perfectly with the 20 of Pillars of Frost. With this set of talents, using them on cooldown will naturally line up, but check the timers just to be sure. Also, besides all of that, your anti-magic shell can also be used as a DPS cooldown. Remember that the damage absorbed gives you runic power, especially with the talent, so make good use of it in raid boss fights to gain a couple more frost strikes. And last thing, as Frost, your shell removes the magic debuffs that you already have, not all, but most, so it can make certain boss mechanics completely worthless against you, so save them for such fights, experiment to see what works and what doesn't, and make good use out of it. And that covers your single target rotation. As for your multi-target rotation, not much changes. Your AoE damage here is gonna come from Rhyme procs and Remorseless Winter, so your normal rotation stays. You're just gonna cleave naturally. But if you have Frost Scythe talented, you're gonna switch it from your Obliterates. The thing with it is that on itself, its damage is low, but when it crits, it does 4 times more damage. So you only want to use it with a Killing Machine. Remember that Obliteration and Rhyme procs works and comes from it as well, so their use stay the same here, and take advantage of that to pull some really juicy AoE numbers. That said, if you are in a situation where you have 5+ mobs, you can use it even without the Killing Machine proc. For sure you're gonna get 1 or 2 crits in there, natural crits, without Killing Machine, which will then overtake a single Obliterate damage, and then besides that, keep a normal rotation and your AoE damage will just come out. And that covers it all. Now, as for stats and to wrap up. So stats in Frost always been pretty weird since the start of Legion. They change quite a lot depending on what gear you're using. The general rule of thumb is to keep crits between 20 to 30% for those killing machines, and a haste between 25% to 30%, and get as much strength as you can, so item level. Once you get pretty high on there, haste will value you more then, especially with tier 21 as well. As for mastery and versatility are okay, you want some, but it's never your priority stat. Overall, again, it's pretty weird. Doing stat weight sims is the only way to be sure on what you need at any given point, so get on the Raidbot's website and start simming those stat weights. As for legendaries, the wrists and waists are currently your best ones with the tier 21. Without them, they are still best, but the chest comes close. For that Chains of Ice that you want to squeeze in only at 20 stacks and only with Pillars of Frost. So if you're using it, remember those two rules, alright? Like Obliteration, they should line up always though. In conclusion, Frost isn't all that hard to play. It really comes down to resource management when you get really into it. But even if you do that poorly, your damage will still be fine, and we can insert all the only need 2 buttons to play memes here. But I don't know, there's a good enjoyment from it. I particularly liked the remorseless winter gathering storm stacking. It's always a great feeling when you manage to make it last for 20 seconds, or how your DPS can be so reliable. Your burst isn't the best, but between your fast cooldowns and how consistent your abilities are, you are able to keep a decent DPS for long periods of time. As for your lack of mobility, which is also kind of a meme now, well, you just have to manage your Wraith walk properly, alright? Manage that well by knowing when you need to move, so know your mechanics and do not use it recklessly. And guys, that covers it all. If you're looking for my add-ons, check down in the description, and like I said in the beginning, do comment on why you love or hate the Frost Decay. I hope it was helpful. Like and subscribe for more videos like this. As always, have a fantastic day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.